Okay, so here is my ABS module. It's throwing a code, and from what I understand, it can be rebuilt. Start on, I guess, reinforcing the solder joints on the board in there, and adding new thermal grease, which I have. These 4 bolts that hold it to the pump are T20s, but they strip pretty easily, especially if they've never been taken apart before. It's a very tight spot, at least on this incomplete truck. It's a very tight area. I've seen what other people have used to get it off, and I had the same exact tool, and it didn't work. So threatening to strip really bad, so I just took the whole thing off. I disconnected these hoses, these lines going into it, the inlets and the outlets, and then of course these were 1/2 inch mounted to the frame itself. So disconnecting, taking off these 1/2 inch bolts and undoing these 2 plugs right inside there. Pretty simple. I don't think it really needs much explaining to get those off, but this is where we're at right now. I'm gonna finish taking these T20s off of here, and we'll break it open. Okay, so the bolts are removed, and yes, I know it's porta cable, but that drill has outlived every other drill I've owned, so it's old. If it's working, don't throw it away. Anyways, so I got these out. Before I loosened them up all the way, I made sure that this is clean with an air gun and a pick and a wire brush, just to make sure nothing falls inside of there. Let's see, this is gonna come loose with one hand. Yep. Now there's another plug. So these, you wanna make sure they stay clean. You don't wanna mess with that. So this is the piece that we're wanting right here. So we're just gonna take that plug off and bring it inside. Okay, so ended up being these 2 right here, this one, and then this one over here. So those 4 bolts holding it in. You can, and you should have been able to see this. I wasn't looking, but see these, those little anchor points for the bolt. So there's those 4. So getting those 4 out, and then using a razor blade to come in here carefully. You don't want to go too crazy or too deep. You can see on my blade, I maybe about that deep, about that deep. That's probably about a 1/4 inch or so. But anyways, take that open. I take that open, and you can see where they had the thermal grease for the heat sink. Go ahead and scrape that off, and try to clean it up on here. Maybe using some alcohol or distilled water, preferably alcohol. Just kind of use a little plastic scraper like I got here. Just kind of scraping that off. And then some of these solder joints, like say, like this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, these 4, and then maybe I might hit a couple of these up here too. Oh, man, I gotta get better with this. Hit these up here too, to just kind of reinforce them. Fresh solder on them, clean it up real good. But we're gonna inspect it, take a look at it, and make sure everything is nice and solid on here. Nothing's popped or blown or shorted out anywhere. So we'll get started on that. So I went ahead and I fluxed all the legs that will be resoldered. There's going to be some heavy legs or pins and some smaller pins. So basically what we're doing is we're just resoldering the connections that make up, or resoldering the legs that make up the connections for the harness plugs and those sensors that you see on the pump side of the ABS module. So if you're ever unsure, you can just turn that piece over, and you can see where the plugs are and the pins that go through it. And same thing with those cylindrical electrical connections, those sensors there. I guess I'd tell the pump when to kick on. So for the larger pins, the temperature that I found to be the most effective is 795 degrees Fahrenheit for the soldering iron. And for the smaller pins, the ones that are going to the plugs themselves in the harness on the truck, those took pretty well at 550 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the type of flux that you use and the type of solder that you use makes a difference on that. So basically, you want to make sure to have it hot enough to where you're not just sitting there on it for a long period of time, but also, yes, so hot enough so that you're not sitting there for a long period of time, and but not so hot that you're cooking it. You know, so if it's too cold and you're sitting on it, you'll start cooking the things around and getting everything hot. But if it's too hot, then you can end up causing the solder to drip out the other side of that board. And you don't want that either. So just making sure that the solder takes and stays on that copper pad. So when those pins come up, it's coming up through a copper pad on the board. And that's what makes your connection. You want to make sure you stay on that copper pad. A lot of these pins are really close together. And if you're using too big of a tip or too much solder or too much heat, or even too little heat, really, if you're heating the whole thing, you can cause problems. You can cause bridging. You can start messing up that coating that's on the board. So just things to kind of be mindful of when you're doing this repair. So some of the solder joints were giving me trouble with especially the old solder. No matter how much flux you use, it didn't want to act right. So the only way to really deal with that is with a solder sucker like this, heating it up and pulling that old solder off. Sometimes you might have to try to add a dab or two of solder to it, some new solder, after fluxing it, of course, and then heating it up and trying to pull it all off with all that solder off with the solder sucker. The solder sucker. They're pretty cheap. You can get one on Amazon. Usually sell them in packs of 6 or 5 if you need that many. But some of them, that was the only way to get them to be resoldered, and that's what we had to do. So right now I'm just kind of scrubbing the surface with isopropyl alcohol. I believe you can use distilled water if you want, but I like to use the alcohol instead, just to get all that flux off. So we're going to look it over after getting it all cleaned up real good, and just put it under the magnifying glass. Make sure nothing was missed. Make sure no pins are being bridged with solder, especially the ones that are really close together, and just make sure there's an air gap between them. And then just make sure everything was good before we start closing this back up. Skip some stuff for the video, but when using the isopropyl alcohol on this board, like I did earlier, I wanted to mention something. Make sure, it's safe for the most part because it evaporates, but just be sure when you're cleaning that excess flux and everything up with that alcohol, don't let it sit. Don't let it sit for very long, because it can start to eat away at any kind of sealant on some of these either capacitors or diodes. If they have any kind of plastic or rubber sealant on them, it could start to affect that. So you want to make sure you don't let it set for very long. I did start getting the gasket out. I noticed that on both sides it has this groove, which makes it a pain in the neck to get that gasket maker, whatever that RTV, whatever they use to get that out. It is a fight. So all I did was a little small flathead, and you just run it on an angle on this side, and then run on an angle this side. After you scrape the bulk of it off with a razor blade, and that kind of helps it come out one whole piece for the most part, because you really just want to make sure you leave a nice little footing for your sealant to attach to, and you want to make sure all the loose pieces are gone, because you don't want to attach it to loose pieces of sealant. So yeah, we kind of cleaned that up real good, put some isopropyl on there, let it sit on it for a while, which helped loosen it up some. And then I just kind of went back with a steel brush to kind of scrape off most of this, because this is aluminum, so it's pretty hardy. I'm not going to worry about being super careful with this, as you can see from those gouges from when I was prying it open with the screwdriver. I did notice one other thing. A lot of people have a tendency to, when they're prying on it, they want to stick the screwdriver in and pry this way. You don't want to do that, because you can, if you go too far, you can hit this board either on this edge here and pop it. So what you want to do is just get it kind of started in there and then twist it. It is the safest way to make sure you don't damage anything internally. So again, with this heat sink, it comes off really easy. I just scraped it off with this flathead. Didn't take much, you know, so I have a little bit right here to take off. You kind of just, you know, it just peels right off. You see that? It just shaved it off. So it's easy to get it off. It didn't take much. So after I get this cleaned up, I'm gonna set this aside. Right now I have some isopropyl sitting on just this gasket edge. I had my my brush that I used to kind of tap it on there. Afterwards, I made sure I went back and made sure I got it off the board itself, just letting it sit only on the plastic gasket area. And then we'll come back and scrape it with the little screwdriver, like I had told you about. Just to get, you're not going to get it perfect, especially this piece, because this is plastic. You really don't want to run your wire brush on this, because you know, you'll be flinging little shavings, little pieces all up underneath there, and you don't want to mess with that. You want most of it to come off in big solid chunks, and just I use my tweezer to kind of pull them out from underneath, just to make sure there's no trash getting in there. So we'll kind of clean it up the best we can without getting too crazy, and then we're gonna go ahead and put it back together. So okay, so now some may feel like cleaning off this gasket was a waste of time, and you're probably right. You don't have to. I'm sure just another layer of that sealant would have been fine, but I'm crazy, so I like to clean it up. And I did lie. I did actually use a brush, this steel brush, just on the plastic edge, only because I have an air compressor to blow it all out, make sure it's clean. But no, you probably would have been just fine re-going over these connections, re-tinning those, and then changing out the heat sink and adding a new sealant and putting it back together. So we're going to go ahead and add our heat sink. So I have MX4 thermal grease. That's what I use. So I'm going to go ahead and then put that on there. That's probably about the size of a pea, or about half the size of a pea. And then as for my sealant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it onto the aluminum cover and attach it from there. So what I use is, I do like using the good stuff, the right stuff, whatever it's called, but it never seems to last with me. It always dries out. So now I'm using Mega Black. So Versachem. So this is a something you just get from O'Reilly's or Advanced. I think it has a 700-degree temp rating. So that's all you'll ever need for this. If it gets that hot, you have other problems. Okay. So just putting a nice layer on there, probably like an 1/8 inch thick, really, not much more than that. Just gonna go ahead and set this onto here. Unfortunately, they have those little plastic dowels, so that helps a lot. But I'm gonna go ahead and get these T8s started. So according to, from what I understand with this compound, is you want to kind of clamp them together, but you don't want to torque it down until 24 hours. Just read your instructions on your compound and it'll tell you how to go about it. But I mean, really, the torque on this stuff is like what, like 7 pounds, something like that. Nothing crazy. Now, you know, if you're watching this video, then you know this repair worked, because I'm not going to post it unless it works. We'll see. It's not magnetic, so we're going to make it magnetic. Fantastic. You gotta love. I love these things. They magnetize it, but I haven't had much success demagnetizing. So, you know. And also with these bolts I'm putting in, I didn't see any evidence of any sort of thread locker on them. So I'm not too concerned about adding anything to it. Can't imagine it, you know. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna tighten them down to what they were. I am gonna worry about weighting the whatever. I think it'll be fine. All right, well, there you go. Now it's just a matter of putting it back in, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get these T20s off of here without disconnecting my brake lines and pulling the whole pump off and disconnecting everything. So unfortunately I have to bleed my brakes, add more fluid, bleed the brakes, and then we'll be able to tell if it made a difference. So we'll see. So I went ahead and cleaned and greased all the electrical connections on those sensors as well. And then I replaced those Torx, those T20s. I replaced them with Allen heads. As you can see, they wanted to strip out on me. So instead of risking having to drill them out the next time, I just left them out and replaced them with some Allen heads. So make things easier for the next time. Hopefully there's no next time, but just in case. Okay, as you can see, I got the module installed in place. Wasn't sure if the last clip is gonna make it or not, but I put dielectric grease on all 6 of those connections that I suppose they trigger the pump for the ABS. But those 6 connections, those probe cylindrical things that you saw in there, I cleaned them up a little bit. They had some residue on them. Cleaned them up with some real fine sandpaper, and then put dielectric grease on them. When you're installing this, you saw how I changed out the hardware to Allen heads, a little easier to deal with. Make sure you install that clip. I'm not sure if you can see it, this plug back here, before you attach it. Makes it a little easier. But putting dielectric grease on all the connections, and then for the 3 bolts that attach it to the frame here, I'll be adding some blue thread locker to it. As for the once were torque heads up here that I changed over to Allen's, you know, like you say, there was no thread locker on the originals, and so that I saw anyways. and so I just went ahead and tightened them down by hand without any kind of locker on them. So we're gonna finish this up, put those 3 bolts in place, and then make sure you keep these in order. But they're shaped. They don't really move around too much, so it's going to be hard to lose track of what goes where. But just to be sure that you put them back in the right place. So we're going to finish hooking this up, tightening those down, adding more brake fluid and bleeding it, and then see what happens. All right, moment of truth. And it has a little bit of an exhaust leak. The flange is cracked on the manifold, and I just haven't gotten around to fixing that yet. That's gonna be the next thing, but let's see if that repaired to the ABS system worked. So we're on the Artidiag TOPDON, ready to do a scan, and let's see if that was a waste of time. Well, fantastic. I think this is the first time this truck has not had over 8 fault codes since whoever's had it before me. But well, there you go. So I guess I'll be putting this video on YouTube. If it wasn't gonna work, I wouldn't have posted it, but there you go. Maybe there's something to it.